So I'm going to start off the talk here asking the question that I think all of the people who are not in this room are asking themselves, which is, why should libertarians want to stay young in the first place? But there are some good libertarian reasons to try to avoid aging. And one of them, of course, is personal, and that is that life itself has value. So we're all interested in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? But we can't have liberty and the pursuit of happiness if we're dead. We have to have life first. So that's one aspect. And then, as Gene said, aging is involuntary. It's forced upon us, much like government items are forced upon us. And so in that sense, it's at least anthropocentrically a violation of the non-aggression principle. I also have problems with the law of gravity, but I don't know how to do anything about that yet, so stay tuned on that. And the last point I would raise about this is that you all have something very valuable in your heads right now. You have knowledge and orientation that most of the public does not have. And that's really important, and I'm going to just spend a moment amplifying on that for a second. So this is how civilization works. This is how learning works. This is how progress works. Knowing something makes it easier to know more, and then that in turn makes it easier to know even more. So progress tends to advance at an exponential rate over time. And this progression of progress has been noticed by Ray Kurzweil, and he's written books like The Singularity is Near and The Singularity is Nearer. And in those books, he projects these trends out, and his projections indicate that because of this exponential growth curve, we're going to have some very good things happening in the fairly near future. And that's all wonderful, but I've been concerned about something for a while. But before we get there, I just want to say that some of Ray's projections of progress versus time started pretty close to 1776, you know. So I think that if you're living in a free culture, progress is automatically favored, you know, but you're free to innovate and do what you want to do. But as I started to say, there's a thing that I have been unhappy about, and that's that along with technological progress going up exponentially, it seems that authoritarianism has been increasing exponentially as well, and starting with Karl Marx, who came along not that long after Jefferson, and that's the first version of the Communist Manifesto on the right. And unfortunately, I think what's happening is that society's forgetting what we always knew. You know, America was founded as a libertarian country, first libertarian country, I think, in the world. And but we're forgetting all of that now. The memories of Thomas Jefferson are getting fuzzier as time goes by. And the schools are teaching things by people like Karl Marx that nowadays. And so people are beginning to learn new things that are not true. So culturally, we're experiencing a form of amnesia, and it's very totally pertinent to libertarian ideas. So in the past, when I was growing up and a younger person, I looked to heroes in the libertarian movement like these people, and I felt fairly hopeful about the future because we had these champions who remembered what liberty was all about and what the liberty, you know, what that does for a country. But unfortunately, they're all dead. These are all people who have died. And I would contend we cannot afford to continue to have losses like this, because who are they being replaced with? The next generation just doesn't seem to have the same view of liberty as we do, and you never saw this slide because I don't want to get hauled off to some gulag like happened to certain other people recently, but this is my view of the problem we're facing now. So I'd like you all to stick around and maintain your grip on reality a little bit longer so that you can teach others and society can resist totalitarian tendencies. We need you. But now we get down to the meat of this. How do you actually stick around? So people have been looking for the fountain of youth for a long, long time, and we haven't really found it yet. So are there ways? And the answer is, yeah, there's all kinds of interesting methods for dealing with aging in various ways, but I'm just going to tell you about my method right now. So I noticed a long time ago that the thymus is a really great point to intervene in aging. So the thymus is the master gland of your immune system. It's located under your breastbone between your body wall and your heart. And it's where bone marrow cells go to be turned into immune cells called T cells. So T means it's educated by the thymus. And these are the cells that essentially do the heavy lifting for your immune system, a good portion of your immune system, the adaptive part of your immune system. They kill infectious agents that are trying to kill you, and they kill cancer cells that are trying to kill you. They also help B cells make antibodies, so they're awfully important. And they're actually the part of the immune system that suffers the most with aging. And that's probably because the thymus is the first organ to show changes related to aging, and I'm going to show you that in some detail. And so some people think that the thymus may be a pacemaker of aging body-wide, and I think there's a lot of evidence that would support that. You're going to see some of that during this talk. But the amazing thing is that thymic aging can be reversed. And if we don't do that, then we're not going to live much longer, even if other approaches to dealing with aging are completely successful, because you can die of HIV when you're 10, theoretically. You know, so you have to have an immune system. If we don't have an immune system, we're going to die no matter how old we are biologically. So this is the problem. It's called thymic involution. It's biologically programmed destruction of the thymus. It's triggered by becoming an adult, by going through puberty. So what the diagram indicates is that the newborn thymus is composed of nothing but functional cells. But even by the time you're 17, a lot of your functional cells have been replaced with fat. And fat does not do your immune system any good. By the time we get to be about 50 or so, the vast majority of your thymus has been replaced with fat, which is not good. So what's the consequence of this? Well, the consequence of this is that there's a delayed effect, because these lovely T cells that are out there protecting you against what wants to kill you may last for decades. But eventually they wear out if they're not being produced by this wonderful thymus gland anymore. And as the T cells disappear, their ability, the ability of the T cell population to recognize infectious disease agents and cancer diminishes. Between the ages of 60 and 80, it diminishes by 98%. I think as a result of that, most people die of infectious diseases and cancer after the age of 60. And this is just some of the data that supports that kind of conclusion. We all know, by the way, that human mortality kicks in somewhere between 60 and 80. That's when most of us die of aging. I think that's not a coincidence either. But the first diagram shows that if you're over 80 and you have a good immune system, your risk of death in 2 years is not that bad. But if you have a poor immune system, your risk of death in 2 years can be predicted with about an 80% success rate. That's just sort of overall global all-cause mortality. The next one is for flu. So most people who die of the flu are over the age of 60, 60 being indicated by the red arrow. Same thing for COVID-19. Of course, the absolute numbers here are debatable, but in terms of the relative susceptibility to COVID, you can see that it skyrockets after the age of 60, which is when your immune system is collapsing due to lack of T cells. Same thing with cancer mortality, prostate cancer mortality. And I added up all infectious diseases and cancer to see what percentage of the death rate it accounts for as we get older. And when you're 20, it accounts for maybe 5% of your death risk. But when you're even 50, it accounts for maybe 30%. And that's not even when you get to 60 yet. It's obviously skyrocketing after that. And so if you're going to die, according to this, your thymus may have something to do with about 30% of your risk of death, even if you're 50. But it's probably worse than that, because as you get older, you also develop autoimmune conditions, which tends to lead to inflammation, which causes atherosclerosis, which causes cardiovascular disease mortality, which kills 70% of us, independently of everything else I just told you. So you add that up, it gets kind of close to 100% in there. Whereas people who live a long time, they live to the age of 100 or more, they have better immune systems than the rest of us. Their immune systems are preserved better. So for all of these reasons and more, my outfit, Intervene Immune, started a clinical trial called the TRIIM trial, and that's thymus regeneration, immunorestoration, and insulin mitigation, and I'll explain that in a sec. And we ran that at Stanford University between 2015 and 2017. We treated 9 healthy men, and you see the first cohort of 6 guys in the middle and the second cohort of 3 guys on the right side. And we treated them for 1 year, and they were 51 to 65 years of age. They received 4 times a week an injection of growth hormone plus dehydroepiandrosterone and metformin, and I'll tell you about those in a second. But it was just a feasibility study to see if it was possible to regrow the thymus and see if we ran into any other problems, but it was so successful that we got it published in Aging Cell, and it's become quite a worldwide sensation ever since, and I'll show you why. So let me first explain why we have DHEA and metformin in the mix. So growth hormone is what regrows the thymus, and if we regrow the thymus, we will restore the T cells and hopefully restore our immune system. But there's a problem with growth hormone, and that is that it causes insulin levels to go up. It makes your insulin less effective. So to control your blood sugar, your body has to make more insulin. Turns out that insulin is a pro-aging factor, and so we don't like that. But growth hormone is very prevalent when you're young, and young people are running around with tons of growth hormone and they're not diabetics. So why does giving growth hormone to an older person cause you to become a diabetic? And I reason that the answer is that young people also have large levels of this natural hormone called DHEA, which is made by your adrenal gland. It's prevalent in higher concentrations than any other adrenal steroid, basically. And maybe that counteracts this diabetogenic effect of growth hormone. So I did an experiment on myself. What you see on the left is just self-experiments, which I did several times. I take growth hormone for a week, then take growth hormone for a week, the same dose, but with DHEA. And you see after the first week, insulin goes up. After the second week, it goes down. So this side effect of growth hormone can be dealt with. Sometimes it's not enough, so we throw in metformin to make it more effective. The benefits of this is that in addition to blocking the side effect of growth hormone, DHEA reduces all-cause mortality, cardiovascular mortality, and likelihood of hospitalization and so forth. Whereas metformin is not only an oral insulin sensitizer, it's widely prescribed for that purpose, it's also an anti-inflammatory agent, anti-carcinogenic, et cetera. It's been proposed as an aging intervention in its own right. So this is what happened when we tried this regimen on these guys. In the upper left, you see the thymus did regenerate. The white area on the extreme left is mostly fat in the thymus, and then as time goes by, that turns gray. And new T cells were, in fact, produced, and old T cells were cleared out. And that's important because the old T cells, this particular flavor of old T cells, actually prevent your body from rejecting cancer. And the pharmaceutical industry is raking in about $12 billion every year with drugs that lower these T cells. But it turns out if you just make your immune system younger, you can lower them all by yourself. And cancer risk also went down. We were afraid that because growth hormone is a growth factor, it makes cells divide, that there might be a danger of increasing cancer, but at least prostate cancer risk seems to go down. And inflammation went down as well. Well, we were worried that if you have an inflammatory state, which is a sort of an out of kilter response to your immune system, and you make the immune response even stronger, that may become worse, but it actually got better. But then we started, so those are kind of things that we could more or less predict, but then we started seeing some things we really were not expecting to see, such as in 3 out of the 9 guys, their hair started growing in dark again. And this is the guy we were able to really document. As you can see, his hair darkening was so noticeable, his wife said something to him about it, so we were able to compile these photographs of before and after. But we did see that in a couple of other guys, and we also saw an improvement in kidney function. So the filtration rate of kidneys always goes down as you get older, everything always gets worse, but our guys were going in the opposite direction at a very stately pace. And that seemed to continue even after 360 days. After the treatment ended, the kidneys may have been getting better even then. So this led to a greater question, which is, okay, we set out to reverse immune system aging, but might we be having an effect on aging in general? And it turns out that there's a way to answer that question. So the gentleman that you see pictured here is Steve Horvath. He's a professor at UCLA, or was until recently. And in 2013, he answered the age-old question of how do you actually measure aging? It turns out to be really hard to measure aging in a good way. But he came up with this thing called DNA methylation, or the epigenetic aging clock. So what this means is that as we get older, we use different genes. So when we're a fertilized egg cell, we're using different genes than when we're a baby, and we're using different genes than when we're a teenager, and it turns out that we use different genes when we get older as well. And these genes are used by changing decorations on your DNA that include one decoration in particular called methyl groups. It's a very simple chemical adduct that's added on to either make some genes turn off or make some genes turn on. And so Steve was able to find this pattern, which you see in the diagram, of this continuous function that you could correlate with aging from the age of a fertilized egg cell in humans to the age of 100. And it pertains not just to blood, but to every tissue in your body, every cell type in your body. So that was a pretty spectacular discovery, and it implies that aging is some kind of orchestrated event. And that was impressive enough, but then Steve went on to show that he could develop the same kind of epigenetic clock or aging metric for cats, and then he found he could develop a similar aging metric for dogs, and then he really outdid himself and showed that he could develop a single aging clock, an epigenetic aging clock that would account for aging from everything from tree shrews to blue whales, over 100 different mammalian species. So we were fortunate that Steve became interested in our trial and agreed to analyze our aging data for this TRIIM trial that we had just done. And the first result that he got kind of floored him, because it showed that the aging in our population was going in reverse. That's what you see in the upper left panel. And he couldn't quite believe it, because Steve is a famous guy and people send him samples from all over the world and they are hoping to slow aging down by 5 or 10%. And he never saw it go in reverse. Real quick. I'll tell you about that. So Steve saw this result. It's unprecedented, never been seen even in an animal before. This is human data. So he volunteered to run 3 other epigenetic aging clocks: the Levine Pheno age clock, the Hannum clock, and the Grimm age clock. And they all showed the same thing. The details are a little different, but they all showed the same thing. It's important because these clocks were devised to measure different things about aging. So DNA methylation, DNA-M, is designed to predict what chronological age you are, from your biological age. Levine's clock and the Grimm age clock are intended to tell how biologically old you are without reference to your chronological age. And Grimm age in particular was designed to predict when you're going to die. So if you see a 2-year reversal in Grimm age, which is what we saw, that's a good sign that you may actually end up living longer. And what we saw is even after the end of treatment at 12 months, the Grimm age clock did not change. It retained that 2-year advantage, which implies you may live a bit longer. If you look at all of the clocks on average, the blue points in the lower left, you see that after 9 months of treatment, we regressed aging by about a year, and after another 3 months, we regressed aging by about 2.5 years altogether. And so to summarize it, this little cartoon diagram is that normally what happens is that if a year goes by, you get a year older biologically. And there's been this theoretical idea that if you could prevent aging, that a year would go by and you wouldn't get older, you'd stay the same biological age, and that would be called longevity escape velocity. But what we saw is actually better than that. Our guys at the end of the trial were 1.5 years younger biologically than they were before they started the trial, which means that we not only reversed the 1 year that the trial itself took, We're older chronologically by 1 year at the end of this trial, but we reverse that and then another 1.5 years on top of that. So another interesting feature of this data is that you'll notice in all of these individual results and in this, the average of all the individual results, that the slope of the line is kind of shallow at first and then it speeds up in the last 3 months. So what we found is that aging was going in reverse by about 1.5 days for every day of treatment for the first 9 months, and in the last 3 months, it was going in reverse by about 6.5 days for every day of treatment. Now, since all of this came to light and we published this, Steve Horvath went back and compared our data to another aging clock, a fifth aging clock. This one has nothing to do with adding little decorations to DNA. This is something you can measure with a simple blood test, and a simple inexpensive blood test. And on average, you can see the blue points on the right side of the screen are very similar to the blue points on the left side of the screen. So we're seeing that we may be able to follow progress in this trial in real time as we go through it, whereas all these other clocks require that you freeze the cells and look at them after the trial is over. So this, we're kind of excited by these results, but they leave a lot of things unanswered, such as, will we see effects like this in women? Because this is all guys. Will we see effects in people who are over the age of 65? Maybe it's even better if you're less than 50, so we're going to be looking at that. So we're doing this new trial called the TRIIM-X trial, and we have a presentation at 5 o'clock about this. X refers to the extension of the TRIIM trial. So we're extending it to women, we're extending it to longer treatment times, and we started this in November of 2020, and we've enrolled about a quarter of the number of volunteers we expect to enroll. We've moved the venue to Southern California. That's our headquarters at BioLabs at the Lundquist Institute. So far, we've enrolled 20 men and 6 women, and we're still enrolling. And the enrollment statistics are shown in the middle up to the first 11 months. So this is our venue in more detail. It's part of the Harbor UCLA Medical Complex. That complex houses the other institute highlighted in the blue box called the Lundquist Institute. And within the Lundquist Institute, the Medical Research Laboratory, BioLabs, is our headquarters, and there are facilities nearby us, easy walking distance, where we can have other tests done, such as leg strength, thymus imaging, and body composition, bone density, and fat content. So let's just talk about how people experience this treatment in TRIIM and in TRIIM-X in terms of side effects. So there is a side effect that you can develop called carpal tunnel syndrome. It's a well-known side effect of growth hormone, but it's reversible. It's not a major problem. Arthralgias and finger stiffness are related to that. You can get gynecomastia in men, but it's not serious. Muscle soreness or difficulty swallowing metformin, it can upset your stomach. Those are all trivial problems. And one person in the first trial felt anxious, and another person in the second trial reported increased libido, but that side effect was not complained about. All right. So there may be a tendency for some people to have lower concentrations of red blood cells in their bloodstreams. Doesn't seem too serious at this point. We're keeping an eye on that. And your prostate-specific antigen may spike, and that used to scare us, but now we realize that that's not prostate cancer, that's something else, because it always comes back down again. And I'm in the trial myself, and I've had that happen several times, and I'm not worried. Okay, so how about more general comparisons between the original trial and what we're doing now, which bears on the validity of the original trial. So in general, side effects are mild and manageable. We're continuing to see a reduction in inflammation, which is a cardinal sign of aging, getting reversed. Improved prostate health, indicated by reduced prostate antigen. Improved kidney function is showing up in some of our volunteers, and reduced plasma pheno-age is showing up in many of our volunteers. And we're not seeing a lot in terms of hair darkening, but one of the women at least had her eyebrows growing dark again, so that's something. But we're also seeing some new things. especially in women. The women are just losing weight, and it seems to be healthy weight loss. And I keep hearing more about this all the time. Both men and women have shown improved strength, and I'll show you something about that as we go along. And we've seen improved exercise endurance, better athletic performance, both in men and women. And another new effect is that as we get older, of course, one of the things that goes to hell is our lungs. And so if your lungs can't exchange gases, not only might you need oxygen, but your carbon dioxide levels tend to build up. And we're seeing that people that have high carbon dioxide levels, it seems to be going back down again. So maybe you don't have to smother to death after all as you get older. That would be nice. And I haven't really noticed the men looking younger, but I've noticed the women looking younger. I'm very impressed by that in some of the women. And high cholesterol has come down, high triglycerides have come down, a lot of things like that when they've been elevated. And one of the women actually reported that she doesn't need to use glasses to read anymore. So this is an example of reversal of the plasma pheno age in a 77-year-old woman, kind of bouncing around between -2 and +1 years compared to her chronological age at the beginning, but then starting this very nice exponential decay of her biological age as measured by the plasma pheno age clock. This is another interesting result for another guy who happened to be both in TRIIM and in TRIIM-X. So when he started TRIIM, he was biologically 3.7 years older than his chronological age, as that first red dot indicates compared to the first green dot. And at the end of the TRIIM trial, he was 4.4 years younger than his chronological age. And when he stopped TRIIM, we followed up on him about 9 months later, and he had gained another 3.3 years, so he is now 7.7 years younger than his chronological age, which if you compare where he was to his projected biological age at the same time, he was actually 11.4 years younger than he should have been, according to just sitting on the couch and doing nothing instead of being in TRIIM. But then he entered TRIIM-X some years later, and so we got a chance to have a look at him again, and at that time, you can see by the horizontal red line that he was almost the same age 5.3 years after he had started TRIIM as he was when he started TRIIM. And he was 4.6 years younger biologically than he would have been if he had never done TRIIM in the first place. But then he went on TRIIM-X, and in a very short time, he dropped another 2.3 years. So it seems like not only does this effect last a long time, but it can be accumulated. If you get a benefit from one round of treatment, you may be able to add to that downstream. So just want to kind of bring you to some subjective results, what some of the people have reported to me. 61-year-old woman says, people ask me why I look so young. I lost 5 pounds without any effort. Before the trial, I couldn't lose weight. And this is the lady who can read without glasses. Another lady lost 16 pounds. A man did not lose weight, he actually gained weight, but he felt it was muscle rather than fat. A 69-year-old woman said, I can feel myself getting younger, and I've kind of experienced a little bit of that myself. 70-year-old man says, I feel more energetic. My masseuse says I'm leaner than I've been in 10 years. And that's actually your friend, Jean, who said that. This is a 70-year-old woman. I'm 10 pounds lighter. I just got back from skiing. She had considered giving up skiing because it was just too much trouble, but she went up there and had a good time, and she was in tears of joy over that. I'm just quoting her. Anecdotal reports are anecdotes, but over time, if you pile up enough of them, they start turning into data. That's kind of why I'm sharing them with you. And I'm not saying that you're going to have all these same effects, but I'm saying that these effects can happen and have happened. She got into medium ski pants again, and she was comfortable and very delighted about that. This is another guy, 64-year-old. My resistance weights are up across the board by 10%, whereas he had plateaued for several years before he went on the TRIIM-X trial. He also swims on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. He's faster and keeping up with the youngsters, feeling great. Another person went to the doctor because she had some of the carpal tunnel syndrome, and she told the doctor about that problem, and the doctor just took one look at her and said, I want to take some growth hormone too. True story. Amazing. So here's this amazing guy. So this guy just barely squeaked into the trial. He qualified for the trial right before his 81st birthday. He actually technically took his first dose when he was actually 81, which would normally have excluded him by virtue of age. But this guy's incredible. So he started writing me about getting back into athletics. So he says, I ran this 5K race. When I walked up to get my first place medal, the lady questioned me because she thought I was mistaken and was too young. And he says, I was never an athlete. Now I am for my age group. Almost feel guilty. This is the same guy. He wrote back to me a bit after that. He said, am I getting faster this morning? I read my best 5K time in the last 3 years. No one as old as me in today's race, but I did well against the youngsters. By the way, nothing hurts. I had no pain during the run. He says, let's face it, at 81.6, half of my competition is dead and the rest is headed downhill. And then he wrote to me again and he said, I just did my best time in a 5K on April 30th and I had not run for 2 weeks and I really didn't even work at it that hard this time. So that's him crossing the finish line. So again, you know, we have to put limited stock in what people tell you because it could all be the placebo effect or wishful thinking or whatever, but we do have a couple of objective results on a couple people who entered the trial early enough to have 12-month results for some of the supplemental tests that we've offered people, including leg strength. So this 70-year-old guy, after 1 year of treatment without exercise, his leg strength improved by 33%. And the test was administered by a professional, and the professional remarked to this gentleman that he never sees changes that are that big. And he was also able to run through these exercise tests more rapidly and more successfully. So his endurance was improved as well. And we have this other result from a 61-year-old woman after 1 year of treatment and no exercise again. Her leg strength was actually up by 67%. Her body fat was down by 7.2%, bone density is up by 3.2%. These are all things that we, did not know what we would see, but, fortunately, we have some of those data to maybe confirm some of the subjective reports. So I think we're actually coming up pretty close to the end of this talk. And I just want to end by saying that TRIIM-X is open right now. You can participate. I'll go into excruciating detail about all of that at 5 p.m. if anyone's interested in knowing more. There are a few steps which will be summarized in more detail later, but we're running these trials by telemedicine. When we started TRIIM-X, it was in the midst of the onset of the COVID pandemic and people hadn't been able to cope with traveling and things like that. So we developed telemedicine approaches to running everything. So the first step is you get in contact with us. We tell you what the ground rules are for the trial. You agree to those. We send you an online health questionnaire so we can see if you're sick or if you're in danger of developing cancer. We cannot enroll people that might have pre-existing cancer or high risk of cancer because we're causing cells to grow. We're making your thymus get bigger. We're making your muscles get stronger and bigger. So we don't want your cancer to get bigger also, right? So we have to screen you, and we'll go into much more detail about that this afternoon. And so once you screen your health questionnaire, then we'll send you to a Quest diagnostics lab in your area, and we'll have a pre-screened blood test done to make sure you weren't lying like a rug, just to get into the trial. And, some people in TRIIM got in when they shouldn't have gotten in. It turned out okay for them, but, we have to confirm your veracity. So once you pass your blood test, then we will have a group enrollment event. We'd like to do this in groups because if we have 5 or 10 people in a group, they'll all have different questions. And if each of them can hear the questions that the other ones have and the answers to those questions, everybody's understanding what they're volunteering for gets enriched. So if you are participating only by telemedicine, we can do all of this over the internet using Zoom. If you want to have extra tests done, like these leg strength tests or your thymus imaged, then you would come to Southern California, but you only have to do that at the beginning of the trial and then at the 12-month point. So it's not that burdensome to do that. And then during the course of the trial, we'll send you back to Quest several times. We'll communicate with you about what your ongoing results are, and we'll tell you, okay, you need more of this and you need less of that, so that we're going to optimize each individual's dosing regimen for all of the medications in the trial. And it's not just DHEA and metformin and growth hormone, it's a few other things too. Everybody's taking vitamin D, everyone's taking zinc, and there's a couple of extra things we've added in TRIIM-X. But all of that will be optimized to give you your best personal result. And then at the end of the treatment, if you've elected for these in-person tests, you'll come back and get those done. Otherwise, we'll wrap things up with you online. Then what we hope to do is to follow up on how people do over time after they finish the trial too. Just like we had that plasma phenoage result for the guy who was in both TRIIM and TRIIM-X, it's very valuable to see how people do over time. And we tried to survey the original TRIIM population and see how they've done. As far as I can tell, everybody's done fine. None of them have gotten COVID, and none of them have died or gotten sick. So that's a good sign. Okay, but there is a limitation. You all have to live in the United States because we only have a relationship with Quest Diagnostics, which only is located in the United States right now. We're trying to branch out elsewhere, but you have to be here and you have to be reasonably healthy to enter the trial. So I just summarize this treatment regimen, that this is the only treatment that I know of that is able to reverse human epigenetic and plasma indices of aging based on 5 accepted and validated aging clocks. It's the only treatment shown to reverse thymic involution and T-cell aging in normal people who are older than the age of 50. And it is still experimental, but I think it's promising. And I think that if you are interested in other aging treatments, at some point we're going to be combining these treatments because it's compatible with these other aging interventions as well, for the most part.